Hi, and welcome to One Simple Recipe, where we hope to get you one step closer to better health. My name is Judy Matesky, and I am a registered and licensed dietitian with Athens Nutrition, as well as a culinary nutritionist. So I'm happy to be back. We're here weekly, every Thursday at 11:30, bringing you one simple recipe and hoping you give it a try. Today, it's all about frittatas, and we're going to do a really simple version of a frittata, and we'll talk about the difference between what I'm doing and what maybe like a typical frittata might be. But you might ask, what is a frittata? And it's kind of like the lazy omelet. So if you ever try to make omelets and you really struggle with folding it and making sure all the filling stays inside, and it doesn't, and it falls apart, this is an easier version because there's no folding required. So everything just goes in one pan. You can do it as we're going to do it today, which is simply going straight to the oven. But we'll talk about a more traditional frittata, which is typically kind of a hybrid method of cooking where you might do some of it on the stove and then you finish it in the oven. All right, today's is really just 4 ingredients. It's a rosemary and chickpea frittata. So let's get started. I already went ahead and I added my eggs to the bowl. So the recipe that you're gonna see online that I put up, it's with 4 eggs. So this is a very small frittata. And we're gonna talk about the difference between what we're doing versus maybe a more traditional, larger frittata. We're baking it in an 8x8 pan, baking dish, and I have that already sprayed with cooking spray. So couple things about this though, because I'm changing it up a little bit from the recipe that's online. So it's typically 4 eggs, which, again, this is going to serve probably 2 people. It's a very small frittata. And the reason why we're able to just do it directly in the oven without doing stovetop then to the oven is because it's in such a small portion. We don't really need to. It's going to bake easily in the oven and not get too brown or too dry. When you're using 8 eggs or 12 eggs, which is often what I'll do when I make a larger frittata, then we do want to use stovetop method where you'd have a skillet that is non-stick, that is oven proof, and we would do some of this on the stove. But since this is frittatas are so easy anyway, but this is an even shorter shortcut to a frittata. All right, so it's the eggs and it's the chickpeas, and it's just some Parmesan cheese and some rosemary. That's it. But I'm going to talk through a couple little changes I made. So normally 4 eggs, I'm using 5 because my chickpea can was larger. This was a 19-ounce can that I had, and typically they're 15 ounces. So I have a few more chickpeas, so I just added an extra egg just to balance out a little bit. I don't even know if I would have had to, but I did. The other thing that I want to mention when you're making a frittata or when you're making eggs generally, the trick that most chefs will use to keep the eggs a little more tender is to do a combination of adding salt to the eggs as well as a little liquid, which typically is milk, which is I just use a non-fat milk, which is what I always have in my refrigerator. The combination of that little bit of liquid with the salt as you're kind of beating your eggs really helps to keep it tender when it's in the oven or when you're doing stovetop. So the recipe that I put up online didn't include the added of the liquid, and it's fine as is. It's still pretty tender because we are using salt because that helps to keep the eggs tender. But I did splash this one. It looks like there's more milk than there is. It was just a splash of some milk. So that's already in here, and that's not on the original recipe. You can skip it if you don't want to, that's fine. That makes it 5 ingredients, but I wanted to add it because I was reading about frittatas and I thought, let's just add a little splash of milk since most of us probably have that anyway. Not really a measurement, it was just a little splash because we're using so few eggs, you don't need much. All right, so, and then, we're just gonna mix that around. Now, we are gonna add about a half a teaspoon of salt. And again, that helps to keep things tenderized, the egg, as well as keeps it, it brings a lot of flavor to an egg. All right, and then the amount of pepper that you want, I'm just gonna do probably more than some because I love black pepper. Then we have some wonderful herbs growing in the garden. So if you have some fresh rosemary, you could use dry, but just use a lot less and you really wanna crumble it up. You could use other herbs. That's the great thing about frittatas. I'm just going to use some kitchen shears because it's just easier because I don't need a ton. This is, I don't know, I'll probably use a sprig of rosemary. And this is very tender rosemary, so I can even cut some of the sprigs of this rosemary because it's just starting to come up in the garden right now. But anyway, the great thing about frittatas is I like to almost call them your clean out the fridge meal. So I probably make frittatas more often at the end of the week. Sometimes on the weekend, I go and I look in the fridge. I'm like, oh, I have like little bits of different types of roasted vegetables, or I might have, you know, odds and ends of pieces of cheese, and I have a few, maybe some open beans, and or maybe some cooked whole grains like brown rice or farro or quinoa. And I, you know, will just take all of that, and that becomes the filling of this frittata, of the frittata that I'm making. Like I said, I typically will use, let me add a little more rosemary because I do love rosemary. I typically use 8 eggs when I make a frittata. Some recipes will call for 12, but I'll usually do 8. And then when you're doing your frittata, if you're going to use larger amounts, and we'll do another frittata that's done hybrid style where you do it on the stove and then pop it in the oven. But if your fillings are already cooked, then you're good to go. You know, you're pretty much going to throw them into the pan, warm them up with a little olive oil maybe, pour your eggs over that, let it cook a tiny bit, get it started, get the eggs kind of set and kind of beginning to kind of curdle or cook, and you can see the, you know, the pieces as they cook, moving it around a little bit for, you know, a couple of minutes, and then you would finish it in an oven at like maybe 350 for 10 minutes. You know, it's so simple. And worst case scenario is you're making it, it's not quite working, just turn it into a scrambled egg with a lot of extra vegetables or grains that you're adding to it. So it's very forgiving, and yes, there are specific ways to make it so your frittata can get really nice and tender, you know, and I am not quite that picky. If it gets a little bit dry, it's still going to taste great. All right, so we have the salt, the 4 ingredients right now. We've got 3. We've got the eggs, we've got the rosemary, and then salt and pepper if we really want to count. Oh, the 2 ingredients, I take that back. I wasn't really counting salt and pepper, so we've got 2. We've got eggs and we've got rosemary. All right, now I'm just going to go ahead and add all of these chickpeas in. You could just go ahead and put the chickpeas right on the bottom of the bowl and then just pour the egg mixture on top. I'm going to change out this because I really don't need this whisk anymore. All right, so let's stir that around. And then, because I just didn't have Parmesan cheese in my refrigerator. I always do. I don't know why. I must have used it up and forgot to get a new wedge. So I'm actually using nutritional yeast. So that's what's going in. And if you've not used nutritional yeast before, it's great. It's a great Parmesan sub. It's used a lot in vegan cooking as a replacement for Parmesan. I love it on everything. So I'm going to sprinkle some of that in here because then since I don't have the Parmesan, it's about a handful of cheese if you're using regular cheese. You could use feta cheese. You could use Parmesan cheese. You could use goat cheese. You could use, you know, did I say cheddar? Grated cheddar. It's whatever cheese you might have in your refrigerator, so that this particular recipe has very, you know, specific 4 ingredients. But you really, if you don't have, like I'm doing, I didn't have Parmesan cheese, and instead of swapping out a different cheese, I thought, why not just use my nutritional yeast? Because I always have that in my pantry. All right, so we've got the ingredients in here. Now, that's the recipe that you'll see online. The only difference here is, like I said, I splashed it with a little bit of liquid, which was some skim milk, just to, you know, help it stay tender as it bakes in the oven. We're not doing that hybrid method. I am not going to start cooking this on the stove and then finish it in the oven because I'm using so few eggs. It'll be fine. It's gonna cook. The only trick to doing the frittata, I think, is cooking it long enough so that you get the middle, so the middle cooks and it's not runny. You just kind of keep an eye on it. Generally, this recipe is set to do a higher oven. It's 400 degrees, and it's only going to take maybe 15 minutes probably to cook in the oven. If you're doing the hybrid method, the temperature of the oven is lower. It's like 350 because you've already started everything on the stove, and then it's only in the oven for maybe 8 to 10 minutes, you know, depending on how many eggs you're using. So you kind of just check it to make sure it's done. And once it gets a little bit springy, it puffs up a little bit, it gets a little springy, you can tell that it's kind of cooked through, then you pour it out. All right. So, the last thing I was just going to mention, because lemon and rosemary goes so well together, and lemon and eggs actually is a nice combination. I am going to just elevate this a little bit by adding just a little zest, like like a quarter of a teaspoon maybe of lemon zest. It's just, I just thought it would be nice for this. And that's what's great, again, about the frittata. You could do the basic 4 ingredients that the recipe is set for, or if you want to elevate it a little bit by adding what we consider kind of flavor bombs, then go ahead. You know, you could add a little hot sauce to this. That would be great. I just think lemon and rosemary goes so well together, so I thought, why not just add a little lemon. All right, so this just is going to get poured in to that. Again, this is an 8x8 baking dish. Let me pop this over here in the sink. So this is, there it is. It's got lots of chickpeas. So this is a combination of, we've got great protein from the egg and then great protein from the plant protein from the chickpeas, and then wonderful flavor. All right, so this is in like a middle rack. Sort of set your oven to maybe put your oven in the middle of your rack in the middle of the oven. And then I'm gonna set this timer for about 12 minutes. It probably is gonna take a little bit longer than that. But then again, and I'm not going to keep you on here to wait for that to come out in 12 minutes, but it'll puff a little bit. It'll start to get a little bit brown, and just kind of check it so you can tell that the inside, the center of the frittata starts to, solidify and really cook, so it's not real runny. And that's probably only the trick. That's probably the trickiest thing about making the frittata is, when you want that center to get done. But again, because there's so few eggs, this is going to cook pretty quickly in the oven, and I did set it at a higher temperature. We'll come back in, maybe in a couple of weeks, and maybe we'll do another frittata together where we're, sauteing some of the vegetables on the stove, then we're adding the egg, and we're going to start the cooking there, and then we'll finish it in the oven. But remember that this is such a great way to clean out your refrigerator. It's a great way to use up things that are just odds and ends of things that might be in there, and you're trying to put something together at the end of the week. You want a quick, easy meal. This can be dinner, this can be lunch, this can be breakfast. What's great about the frittatas too is that if you make a larger one, you might cut it into into triangular shapes. You could serve that as is with a salad the next day. You can have it as a breakfast sandwich the next day. You can serve it as another meal. It's, for dinner. They're so great because when you do make them, if you don't eat them all, you eat the whole thing at that time you're cooking it. They're so good the second day. So again, enjoy it, play around, don't be afraid of them. If it gets a little dry, don't worry, they're still going to taste great. You can dollop it with a little bit of ketchup if that would help, since I feel like ketchup helps everything. But anyway, I'd love you to give it a try if you've never made frittatas before. All right, reach out, let me know if you do. I'd love to hear from you. We'll be back again next week. We're going to start on some summer desserts because, yes, we all love dessert and we want to continue to have them through the summer. But sometimes we're looking for something a little bit lighter, seasonal, looking for some fruits and things. So we'll be back over the month of June, and we'll talk a little bit about summer snacks, summer desserts. All right, see you soon and stay well.